Living in this quiet little suburban neighborhood, I thought life would be pretty peaceful. I just wanted a bit of privacy and a safe space for my dog to run around. So I decided to build a fence in my backyard. It was a simple, sturdy wooden fence, nothing fancy, but I was proud of how it turned out. I finished the last panel, stepped back, and thought, perfect. Little did I know, I had just painted a giant target on my back for the neighborhood as final boss, the HOA president. A few days later, a sleek, black SUV pulled up right in front of my house. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped a woman in a hot pink blazer, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She marched straight up my driveway, her heels clicking ominously on the pavement. I had a bad feeling about this. She didn't even say hello. She just pointed at my brand new fence and said, "That is completely unacceptable." I was stunned. "Excuse me?" I asked, trying to be polite. She tapped her clipboard. "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. Your fence violates our aesthetic guidelines. It's an eyesore." An eyesore? I looked at my perfectly normal fence, then back at her. She wasn't joking. "You have 7 days to remove it," she declared, then shoved a violation notice into my hand before spinning on her heel and marching back to her SUV. I stood there, holding the piece of paper, completely bewildered. I'd read the HOA rulebook cover to cover before I started building. The rules were so vague. Something about maintaining neighborhood character. What did that even mean? My fence wasn't some wild, eccentric structure. It was just a fence. For 7 days, I stewed over it. I considered fighting it, but the thought of a legal battle with the HOA was exhausting. I decided to wait and see what would happen. Maybe she was just on a power trip and would forget about it. I was wrong about her forgetting, but I was right that things were about to happen. The next few days were interesting. Instead of getting angry letters, I started getting compliments. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, leaned over the very fence in question and told me how much she loved it. "It gives the yard such a cozy, charming feel," she said. Then, the family across the street with 2 little kids stopped by to say they felt safer with a proper barrier between my yard and the street. People would slow down as they drove by, not to gawk at a violation, but to admire my handiwork. It seemed like everyone in the neighborhood, except for one person, actually liked my fence. The community had started to rally, and I had no idea. Exactly 1 week later, the black SUV returned. The pink-blazered president emerged, clipboard in hand, a smug look on her face. She was clearly expecting to see a pile of dismantled wood. Instead, she saw my fence standing tall and proud. But that wasn't all she saw. On my front lawn was a group of my neighbors. Mrs. Gable was there, along with the family from across the street, and a few others. And tied to my fence were blue ribbons, dozens of them. It turned out my neighbors had held an impromptu best yard vote, and thanks to my eyesore of a fence, I had one. The HOA president just stood there, her mouth hanging open, completely speechless. She looked from the ribbons to the smiling faces of my neighbors, then back to me. She turned a shade of red that clashed horribly with her pink blazer, got back in her SUV, and sped off. The fence is still standing today, a symbol of our little neighborhood victory. It just goes to show you what can happen when a community comes together. But you know what? This was just one battle. I've got a feeling there are plenty more crazy HOA stories where that came from. So if you want to hear what happens next, make sure you subscribe. Trust me, some of these Karen showdowns get even wilder. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. So, I just moved into this quiet, little suburban neighborhood. The first thing on my to-do list? Build a fence. Nothing fancy, just something simple for a bit of privacy and to keep my dog from exploring the entire county. I picked out some nice wood, put in the work, and honestly, I was pretty proud of how it turned out. It looked clean, sturdy, and fit right in with the vibe of the place. Or so I thought. About a week later, this sleek, black SUV pulls up and parks right in front of my house. The driver's side door opens, and out steps a woman in a bright pink blazer, holding a clipboard like it's a weapon. She marches up my driveway with a look on her face that could curdle milk. I had a bad feeling about this. She didn't even say hello. She just tapped her pen on the clipboard and said, "I'm the president of the Homeowners Association." Oh, great. Here we go. She pointed at my brand new fence and declared, "This is in direct violation of our community's aesthetic standards." I was completely blindsided. "What's wrong with it?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. The fence was brand new, perfectly straight, and honestly, pretty standard. She just shook her head. "It's an eyesore. It's unacceptable. You have 7 days to have it removed." Then she slapped a piece of paper on my door. A formal warning, got back in her SUV, and drove off without another word. I was stunned. I read the HOA rulebook cover to cover, and the guidelines were so vague. It just said fences had to be aesthetically pleasing. Who decides that? Apparently, Pink Blazer Karen does. I looked at my fence, then at the warning. 7 days? It took me a whole weekend to build that thing. I felt this mix of anger and confusion. I wasn't going to tear down my hard work just because she had a bad day. So, I decided to just wait. Let's see what happens. A few days went by, and something unexpected started happening. My neighbors, the ones who I'd only given a friendly wave to, started stopping by. First, it was Mr. Henderson from across the street. He told me he loved how the dark stain on the wood complemented the trees in my yard. Then, the family next door, the Jacksons, mentioned how much safer they felt with a clear boundary for their kids to see when they're playing. More and more people came by, complimenting the craftsmanship, the style, the added charm it brought to our little corner of the neighborhood. It turned into a local attraction. People were taking pictures. My unacceptable fence was becoming the talk of the town, in a good way. Exactly 7 days later, the black SUV returned. Karen stepped out, clipboard in hand, with a smug look on her face, clearly expecting to see a pile of lumber where my fence used to be. But instead, she saw me, leaning against my very much intact fence, and about a dozen of my neighbors gathered in my front yard, sipping lemonade and chatting. They were all there to show their support. One of them had even made a little sign that said, "We love the fence." Her jaw dropped. The smug look evaporated and was replaced with pure, unfiltered shock. She just stood there, speechless, as Mr. Henderson walked up to her and said, "We just wanted to let you know that we, the community, have voted. This is officially the best yard on the block." Karen just stared, her face turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with her pink blazer. She didn't say a word. She just spun around, got back in her car, and sped away. The fence stayed, and to this day, it's a symbol of how a little bit of neighborly support can make all the difference. You won't believe some of the other HOA battles I've had since then. Subscribe for more crazy HOA stories, because trust me, some Karen battles get even crazier than this one. Thanks for watching.